Hi guys, so this is for all of you empaths who have wondered about codependency and what it means and whether you might be a codependent. Hiya. Welcome everyone. So this is to address empaths and codependency, and the first thing I want to clarify is that not all empaths are codependents. But this should hopefully give you a clearer view of whether or not you might be codependent and help you get an understanding of what codependency means and what the consequences have been in your life from childhood to adulthood, and then what to do about it in order to start your healing journey. So to start off with, I'll explain a little bit about what codependency means. So the simplest way to describe it is the loss of sense of self, of the sense of your own identity, which is caused by a sense of giving to others more than you do yourself. So it's triggered by a sense of overgiving. Now, don't get me wrong, because giving to other people can be more rewarding than receiving. Okay, but what makes codependency faulty is the motive, and the motive with codependency is that you start to overgive in expectation of receiving love or an emotional fix or a sense of happiness or comfort or security. Okay, so it's the motive that makes it faulty, and it's a lack of balance between what would be equal giving and equal receiving. So it's a sense of giving more to others than you would to yourself. Okay. Now the other thing with codependency is that it can create unhealthy attachments to other people, and that's usually triggered by a sense of fearing abandonment. So we get very attached to people when we fear abandonment, which makes it very difficult to leave situations, even though we might realize that it's unhealthy. So I'll explain a bit more about this later, but this is what makes codependency and its treatment a bit more like addiction, because you become addicted to a person by having an extreme sense of attachment to them. So what I want to explain next is, where does this come from? So the first thing is that with empaths in particular, because we feel our surroundings and we feel everyone's energy around us so powerfully, we pick up on the energy of our parents or our surroundings growing up. So when we pick up on the feelings of others, we start to want to adapt to it. Okay, so that's the first thing. The child adapts very powerfully on an emotional level to the deeper inner life of the parent's being. Okay, so the second thing is the child starts to take on responsibilities of the well-being of the parents, which can sometimes mean that the child adapts their own behavior in order to ensure that the parent's well-being is okay, when really it's not the child's responsibility to ensure that the parent is okay in their well-being all the time. Okay, so an example of this would be that a child might start to think, oh, I need to be good, I need to be better, I need to be quieter. So they start to adapt their own behavior in order to aim towards making the parent feel better. Okay. Now the third thing is they start to tune in to what the parents are feeling. So the child becomes on very high alert, very high alert towards tracking and tuning into everything that's going on, as a kind of coping mechanism, start to adjust to it, and this is in relation to the parents' mental, emotional behavior, or even their energy. And therefore takes responsibility, unfortunately, for even their mental health. So what are the consequences to this? If we've grown up with this sort of environment and developed these codependency tendencies through childhood, what's the outcome in adulthood? The first thing is, one of the consequences are that as you grow older, you start to lose contact with your own feelings and needs. You start to lose a sense of understanding of what your own needs and feelings are. So you start to look at everyone and everything externally to yourself to adapt to. And this is to do with a complete loss of your sense of self and understanding your own identity. So you start to adjust to your surroundings and take on everyone else's energy instead of you're not able to identify your own. And that, as a consequence, you start to seek validation from all of these people around you, because you're not connected to who you are within. And all of this, plus the overgiving to other people, can create a high sense of fatigue. So you might end up feeling very tired and weak all the time, because it's quite emotionally draining and exhausting to be giving and trying to adapt to everyone around you all of the time. Okay? What also often happens is that, unfortunately, this emptiness that you end up feeling within you as you grow into an adult that hasn't healed from codependency, is that you start to search for love in order to feed and fill that emptiness. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we can do so in the wrong places, and get drawn towards people who become very controlling, and so we try to prove to them by giving and over-giving. We try to prove to them how much we care and hope that they will acknowledge it. And unfortunately, in narcissistic relationships, you never really get that full sense of acknowledgement, which is why empaths end up trying again and again and again in hope to get that validation. Okay. One important thing to remember, though, is that something I've really noticed is that everything that we encounter in relationships is somewhat a reflection of ourselves, which is what makes us very frustrated. And we feel like, and what I mean by that is when we feel like we're doing everything right in the relationship, in that we're putting in all the efforts to make sure that the other person feels good all the time, and we're putting in extra efforts, but still feel empty within us, and we still feel unseen. And that's when we start to have expectations of the other person. And the unfortunate thing is that the other person will never really fulfill those expectations, because the emptiness is to do with within, not with what you're receiving. Okay? And the ultimate truth in that is that we don't end up really understanding that the solution is something to be discovered and to be filled within ourselves. Now, I spoke a moment ago about narcissistic relationships, and please understand I'm not specifically referring to this at this point in the conversation. But if you imagine yourself being in a healthy relationship when you've got this emptiness still unhealed within you, then unfortunately it can sabotage those healthy relationships when you haven't done that inner work, because you start to have those expectations of the other person to fill something that's not filled within you. Okay, and the other final potential consequence to codependency in adulthood is that when you're trying to fill this void, this emptiness that I was just describing, sometimes it can even turn into addiction. And that's why you'll find that, unfortunately, there are a lot of empaths and highly sensitive people who end up well, it's not the only reason why, but there are some empaths who are codependents end up addicts, as well as some HSPs and empaths. And the reason with codependency is that you're trying to fill this void that you have within you. So that can manifest itself in binge eating, or drinking, or drugs, or anything else, in order to fill that void. Now, of course, separate to that, highly sensitive people and empaths do tend to get drawn towards addictive behavior as well. And that's because they haven't quite grasped how to learn to manage their sensitivities and feel worn down by them. Okay? So those are the consequences. Now, coming to the interesting bit, how do we work on it? Now, like I mentioned before, codependency is a lot like treating an addiction, because you've got the sense of attachment, which is triggered by a fear of abandonment. And when you have a sense of attachment to someone, it becomes very difficult to let them go. Okay? So with that in mind, when you treat addiction, you won't have developed those tendencies overnight. You will have developed the addiction that comes with codependency over a long period of time throughout your childhood, and it will have spilled into your adulthood. So it's not realistic to expect to no longer become codependent overnight either. And this is why it's treated like an addiction, okay? Because it can take time to heal from it. But as well as that, there are withdrawal symptoms. And the withdrawal symptoms are because if you suddenly detach yourself to something that you so deeply want to feel attached to, because it gives you a sense of fulfillment and security and love and the needs that you're trying to fill within you, if it's doing all of that for you, then it's that essentially is what addiction is. So coming off of an addiction does not only take time, but there are withdrawal symptoms that come with it as well. So that's really important to remember. So it's not an easy journey, is what I'm trying to say, okay? So that aside, what else do we need to start doing in order to start working on it? First thing is, and you probably expected this, but boundaries. And saying no when you really are used to saying yes. So in setting boundaries for yourself, it means starting to progressively hold back and withdraw from this sense of overgiving, and start to find this balance between the giving and the giving to others and giving to yourself. And that is a gradual learning process, okay? So that's the first thing to do with boundaries and saying no. Even saying no to others, but even saying no to yourself. Saying no that I won't be saying yes today, okay? I won't be giving in to that today. Okay. Second thing is self-care and time alone, doing things that you enjoy. Exercising, yoga, taking a bath, dancing, doing all of these things that involve just spending time with yourself to get to know yourself again. Because we get so lost in the feelings and emotions of other people, especially as empaths, that we do need time to reconnect to ourselves, and we need more time than others to reconnect to ourselves, to reconnect to our needs and our feelings. Otherwise it gets extremely confusing, and we don't want to fall back into that trap of relying on other people to take on their feelings and their emotions, and consequently seeking validation from them as well. Okay, next thing is be clear on what you are and are not responsible for. So, like I explained earlier with regards to your childhood, if you grew up If you were a codependent child, then you're used to taking the responsibilities of other people. You're used to taking on the responsibilities of parents' emotional needs, and believing that it's your responsibility to make sure that they're okay all the time and they feel safe and they feel secure. So you get so lost in their needs that you're not connected to your own. So be clear on where the line is drawn between your responsibilities and the responsibilities of others, and be clear that the well-being of others is not your responsibility, it's theirs. You can only encourage people and support people, but it's not your responsibility to do it for them or to rescue them. It's a game that you will always lose, unfortunately. Okay. Next thing is heal from the beliefs and the thoughts that you would have had in this need that you had to care for others and in order to feel loved and safe. Okay, so. It's finding a way to allow yourself to feel loved within and safe without seeking that from other people, and without feeling that you have to give and give and give in order to receive that love and care and validation. Next thing is, which I think is the 6th point, or 7th maybe, who knows, is release the victim mindset. And I'm sorry, but I say this again and again, and this is because it really holds people back. Release the victim mindset and stand up for yourself in your own life. Okay? And this is what this brings me to my next point, which is forgiveness and compassion and letting go on a conscious level. Because for as long as we victimize ourselves and blame the previous generations for all of the negative things that we might have inherited from them, that will stop us on our journey towards moving forward for ourselves, which is all we really want, is to take responsibility for our journey ahead. Okay, so forgiveness is tricky, but empathizing with them and consciously making a change today so that it doesn't get passed on to the next generation yet again. Because the reason why it was passed on to you is because there was something unhealed in the previous generation. And it's your responsibility now to ensure that you do the best that you can to live your own life, but also to not pass it on to the next generation. Okay. My next point is ask for help and receive help from someone that you trust. And I encourage anyone who thinks that they might be a codependent to seek help. Because although you might now have this understanding, whether it's new or already familiar to you, it can be quite a journey towards healing from it, and dealing with this addiction that it really is. Okay. And my final 2 points that I recommend are, first, learn to release those behaviors and those thoughts and habits and beliefs. And this is where a coach comes in, if you're not able to do it alone, because it's really challenging to do alone. But this is where it becomes really important to start to release all of those behaviors that are built within you, that you want to start to let go of, and develop new positive habits that will serve you. And my final point is, there is a purpose to all of it, okay? Understand that this is a learning process. You cannot get it right overnight. It's not something that can be healed overnight, but it is something that can be healed over time. And I am evidence of that, okay? So if you feel that it might be your purpose later in life to help to heal others, maybe that's the purpose that you were in the reason why you are experiencing this now. There is always a purpose to everything, and this is a healing journey. And you will develop tools that will benefit you and will benefit the people around you and the next generations that are to come. So if you've noticed, based on what I've said today, and you are an empath or highly sensitive person who relates to all of the points that I mentioned in relation to codependency, and especially if this is something new to you, you might want to start to explore this a little further in a little more depth, and start to turn inwards to understand your behaviors. And self-awareness is really the key thing towards starting the healing process. And in building self-awareness, yes, it's possible to do alone, but I do highly recommend working with someone, whether it's me or someone else. But if I am someone that you want to help guide you towards that, then please reach out and get in touch. I'd be happy to even just have a little chat together before committing, okay? I hope you found this helpful, and if you're on this healing journey, please know that there is hope, and it does get better. I promise you that. Take care, everyone.